This is one of the most dangerous serial killers that has ever lived. And you might not have heard this name before because he fits outside of the mold of a typical serial killer. His name was Israel Keyes, and he lived in Alaska. And the reason why you might not have heard of him is because how he picked his victims was almost completely random. And FBI profilers don't know how to classify this or how to warn people to protect yourself against people like Israel Keyes. So normally serial killers have a MO, a method they do things, a body type of who they pick, a location of where they like to commit these murders at, but not Israel Keyes. Israel Keyes, every step of the way, was completely different from any other serial killer. He lived in Alaska. He traveled to the mainland United States. He would use cash. He would avoid using ATMs at all costs. He would turn his cell phone off before he went on these flights or drives. He would leave his cell phone at home. He was a family man. He had a daughter. He had a very financially stable business. He owned his own business, so he could make his own hours to free himself up for these, stalkings that he would do. But what was so different about him is he would pick people at random, and he was so incredibly patient. So what he would do is he would bury kill kits. It was literally like a bucket that he would seal up, and he would bury ammunition, firearms, knives, any little thing, duct tape, zip ties, things that he might need. And he would bury them years in advance. Key point is he went to Vermont. From Alaska, he landed almost 1,000 miles away in the United States, paid for a rental car in cash because you could back then. This was between 2001 and 2012 is when he was an active serial killer, they believe. He traveled to Vermont, almost 1,000 miles away from where he landed. He buried a kill kit, and then 2 years later came back to use said kill kit. Because this is what happens. You can't travel with a gun, obviously, but he went there to Vermont, bought a gun 2 years ahead of time. No one's going to be looking for gun records 2 years ago. No, you know how many guns they would sell in that amount of time? It's not going to be traced to him. And then he would bury this stuff. And 2 years later, he came back and used it on a random couple. He chose a house at random. He was driving around and said, that's the one. Picked that house. Didn't even know who lived there. It was a man and a woman. He did abduct them. He did kill them. Now, he had already scouted a place where he was going to hide the bodies. No matter who he chose in this area, he's going to hide their bodies in this abandoned farmhouse. That's exactly what he did. They believe that he was responsible for at least 11 deaths, but they can only prove that he did 3. And the reason why is because right after he got captured in 2012, he did off himself. So they don't really have anything to go on. But he left a clue and a suicide note, and he drew a picture that had 11 skulls on it. So they believe that he was responsible for the 11. He notoriously hated any kind of media. A lot of serial killers like to give little tidbits, and they like the chase. He did not want any connection to him whatsoever. That's why he did things the way he did them. So random, so out of nowhere, so they couldn't trace them back to him. And he made demands when they caught him. He said, there will be no delay on a death penalty. Give it to me as soon as you can. There will be no media coverage. If the media gets involved, I stop talking. And that's exactly what happened. The big stream media got involved, and then the next day he committed suicide, and he was going to go through with it. He actually slit his wrist and hung himself. So he was taken both ways out. He was so decisive, and if you watch his interviews, it is so creepy when he's talking about all the planning, all the meticulous stuff, but he wouldn't give names of who his victims were. They have the reason why they think it was at least 11 is because if they went back and looked at his travel logs, his flight logs, when he would take these vacations, and every time when he would go to these different places, there was mysterious disappearances that matched when he went there. None of his victims have ever been found except for the one that got him caught. How he got caught is a lot of people think that he had some kind of a mental break because he did something so out of the ordinary. Is in his hometown where he lived, he abducted a girl, and he used her ATM card. He took photos of her after she was already deceased, trying to make it look like she was alive, and he was demanding ransom. He had tons of money. No one knows why he did this. They think he had a mental snap, and that's the only reason why he ended up getting caught, is this psychotic mental break that he went through, because it was so unlike the other stuff that he had done. There was no pre-planning. There was no traveling. He was using ATM cards instead of cash, and that's how he got caught. So they don't know how many he's responsible for because he traveled a ton, and they don't know how much of all this traveling was accredited to scouting or burying these kits, or which one of these travelings were actually doing the deed. The only reason why they know that he was the one that did those two that he did those two murders is after he got caught, he still had some of their stuff with him, the two elderly people that he abducted in Vermont. But they never found their bodies, and if he wouldn't have had those trophies on him still, they wouldn't have known that he did those. But they can see from his record that with as much traveling as he did, there has to be more bodies. And there's actually a list online that you can look at that show the FBI's list of his possible victims. That way families can try to see if there was any kind of matchup there. But as of 14 years ago, no one's been able to decisively connect the dots on those. It's just weird timing. Probably not weird timing that they disappeared around the time that he traveled to those areas and through those areas. But you got to think, he would fly somewhere thousands of miles away and then drive somewhere 500 to 1,000 miles more. And he would only use paper maps. He would never punch in GPS on his phone because he wouldn't bring his phone with him. He was committed to the bit. He did not falter on any of the things. That's why it's so weird of why did he make this mistake with this last girl? What was going on in his head? I think that's impossible to try to understand what's going on in somebody's head that's like that. They accredit his behavior to a few things in his childhood. Apparently, he was in very isolated religious groups in Utah, which is where he was born. I don't know what religious groups. I'm sure it would be easy to track that down. But he was in isolated religious groups across Utah. He was apparently always fascinated with the military, which he did later join the Army. But everybody who described him and knew him said he was a great handyman. He would do anything for you. He would take the shirt off his back for you. So many people were in disbelief that he was responsible for this when they finally caught him, because he was apparently a caring, loving father. His daughter adored him. He had this great business that he was on top of. He was your quintessential person you would want in your community by all means on paper. Now, when they were going through his house, they did find tons of notes where he had done deep, extensive research on all the famous serial killers, especially Ted Bundy. He loved the fact that Ted Bundy could manipulate his victims, even though the 3 cases that we know for a fact he didn't do any of that. It's just weird that he would want to study them so decisively, but not be like them whatsoever. Maybe he was looking at ways that they got caught, or ways that they were able to be successful for so long. Who knows? But Ted Bundy was by far his favorite, and he essentially had a little miniature shrine to him, essentially, with all of this research and highlighted things in memoirs and books and the interviews. It's really creepy on the research that he was doing on these serial killers. And a key part of what I was talking about earlier was why it was so hard to catch him, because he would use his real name to fly. But here's the thing, where he would land, he might land in Tennessee and then drive all the way up to New York, hundreds and hundreds of miles away. So they would never connect the dots, because, who's looking at who's flying? I mean, you know how many millions of people fly all the time? It would be real easy, if he flew into, Oklahoma City, and then there was a crime in Oklahoma City, But no, he would fly into a major city and then drive a stupid far amount away, without a cell phone or nothing. He would just throw it all, just leave it all behind, just paper map it, people would do back in the 80s and 90s. Now, before he did end his own life, he did tell the location of some of his kill kits that he was planning to use, and they did recover 2 of them. They could not find the other ones, but they could find 2 of them. So they don't know how many he had around the country, but he talked about there was a ton of them out there. And in the 2 that they recovered, there was silencers, there was Drano, there was chemicals, there was ropes. These were big 10-gallon buckets that were just full to the brim of the stuff that he would need. And what's crazy is when he would go rent a car, he would go to a Home Depot and buy a shovel to bury these things. And then he would actually hide the shovel nearby also, so he could come back and use the shovel to dig it back up. That, to me, that's crazy. That's so wild to just hide a shovel. And he would apparently go to super remote places where somebody would not come across his shovel or the hole. It's just, to me, that's a lot of plan. He would take week-long trips just to plan where he was going to put one of these buckets at, and then what he was going to do with the bodies afterwards. So the only thing left to this mystery is who those other 8 skulls were. He drew 11 skulls and left a suicide note right before he took his own life. And 8 of those skulls are unaccounted for. This was his last little nod to this is how many that he actually committed. And he could have been lying about that number. But that's an odd thing to lie about right before making a decisive thing, and he had already talked about how extensively he did not want any media attention, and that's actually why he did end his own life, is he did not want the media attention. So somebody who doesn't want attention and has nothing to gain from it, I don't know why he would make up that number. So I don't think he did make up that number. I think he truly was responsible for 11 deaths. Weirdly enough, when the interviewers were talking to him in the days leading up to this, it is crazy to see how not just like stone-faced he is, but he's like joking in conversations. He's having a good time in the conversations. And one of the interviewers, one of the police officers, actually gets so emotional about what he did to the last girl with him. Like, he literally stitched her eyes open to make it look like her eyes were open, and he put makeup on her face and took photos with her to make her appear alive for these ransom photos where he was trying to get this money. And the detective is getting so emotional, and he's like telling the detective, he's like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you getting upset about this? You didn't know her. Like, that's how much of the part of his brain of empathy was not there, yet he could fake it and was a perfect chameleon to everyone around him. You know, it's a strange rabbit hole to go down, and we'll never truly know what made him snap on that last one. But I mean, at the end of the day, it is awful that she lost her life. But if he would not have had this snap of judgment, no telling, because he was really young, no telling how many more he would have taken out. So at least her death was not in vain, because it put a stop to a serious serial killer that otherwise would have had no way of anybody capturing him, because he left no trail whatsoever. If you all enjoy these podcasts and these creepy stories and these conspiracy theories that we do, follow the podcast. On Spotify and Apple Podcasts, it's called Matt from Nomads. On YouTube, it's Nomads Animal Reserve. There will be a link in the comments for my Facebook viewers. TikTok, you guys just have to search it. Matt from Nomads, Nomads Animal Reserve. Thank you all so much. Hope you all have a great night and could sleep somewhat peacefully after hearing that awful, grotesque story.